So maybe you're having hip or lower back pain. So of course you Google it. And then you start seeing videos that talk about glute amnesia, or even worse, dead butt syndrome. And then you ask yourself, is my butt dead? Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Ed DeBoo, physical therapist from Integrated Physical Therapy in Bellingham, Washington. So first of all, if you can stand up and walk around, your butt's not dead and your glutes are firing. In this video, we'll go over what dead butt syndrome really is, what causes dead butt syndrome or glute amnesia, and most importantly, what you can do to try to take care of it. Although I'm not a fan of either term, dead butt syndrome or glute amnesia, but what they generally mean collectively in simple terms is that your hips aren't working properly, and maybe the muscles are not firing as well as they should, or maybe you don't have enough strength through the glutes to help support the lower back, the hips, and maybe the lower leg. You'll also hear people talk about my glutes not turning on and things like that. Bottom line is, the biggest contributor to this type of syndrome is if we sit too much. The human body was never designed to sit the way we sit sometimes for 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day. And when we sit, the glutes are not really active. So when we stand up and try to move around, we expect the glutes that have been inactive for so long to all of a sudden start firing up like we want it to. And sometimes the connection between the brain and the glute is a little dull. So it takes a little bit before the glute can kind of completely come back on board. And that's where the amnesia comes in, is that the glutes kind of forget how to work. But Ed, I have a job where I sit behind my computer all day long and I can't really help it. So this is what I tell my clients. If you do happen to sit or are sedentary for a job, if at all possible, every 30 minutes, set a timer where you physically have to get up out of your chair and turn it off, and then spend just a couple minutes, like maybe just 3 to 5 minutes standing up, doing some activities. And it could be something as simple as doing 10 squats just to kind of get the blood flowing. You could also work on single leg stance. Bring this leg up here, and as I'm standing here, I'm getting a nice solid contraction of my right glute. I can make circles with my hip. I can work on my balance as well too. Maybe if you need something to hold on to, maybe just do 10 of these right here at your desk. Same thing on the other side, nice and tall. And then consciously think about that glute and squeeze that glute tight. And then you can work on hip circles. You can work on marching. Anything that kind of activates the glutes a little bit, gets the blood flowing. I have one client that works with 4 other co-workers, and at the top of every hour, they all get up and do about 5 minutes worth of exercise. You could walk down the hall and back, you could go up and down a flight of stairs, but you really just don't want to sit any longer, if possible, for about 30 minutes at a time without moving around. Sometimes if you sit for prolonged periods of time, you can start to get a little achy, especially in the hips or basically the butt, and that's paresthesia. So sometimes it's a little tingling, and then you get up and you move around, and usually it goes away, but sometimes it stays with you for a longer period of time. Remember, we were never designed to sit for very long, so 30 minutes at the most, and then just get up and do some sort of exercise for about 3 to 5 minutes. Don't forget to pick up your PDF, 5 Hidden Reasons for Pain. It's absolutely free. I'll put a link down below. You can grab it from my website. Now back to the video. The second thing I want to talk about is, how do you know if you really have it? Now remember, dead butt syndrome isn't really a thing. Your butt is not dead. So the testing for it is somewhat ambiguous. But basically what we're after is, we want to see, is the glute firing as optimally as it can? So there's a couple things that you can do. Pick an exercise that primarily works on the glutes. So for example, you could lie down on your back and you could do some bridging. You could do a double leg bridge, or you could do a single leg bridge. And then just go ahead and do, I don't know, 8 to 10 repetitions, how many ever you need to do, until you can start to get a little fatigue. And you should feel the fatigue in the glute muscles, or basically your butt muscle. If you start to feel it more in your lower back or your hamstring, it could mean that you're using those accessory muscles a little bit more than the primary glute muscles. So that could be an indication that maybe you have a little bit of glute amnesia, or basically the glutes are not firing as well as they should. So let's say you do sit all day, but after work you go to the gym, and today happens to be leg day. So you do a bunch of lunges and squats and things like that. You should start to feel a little muscle burn and muscle fatigue in your hip muscles. The next day, if you're a little sore, you might be sore in your glutes. If you find that you're more sore in your hamstrings and your lower back, that's another indicator that maybe the neural connection to those glute muscles isn't as strong as it should be. And the last part of the video is, okay, what can I really do about it, Ed? So we've already talked about some of this. If you do happen to have a sedentary job, sit no more than 30 minutes. You're going to get up, spend 5 minutes of doing some basic exercise. Like I said, it could be marching in place, it could be standing and doing some squats, it could be doing hip circles, but just something where you're moving around, getting the blood flowing, and you're getting the pressure off of your hips. The second thing is that you want to check to see if there are trigger points in those glute muscles. Because historically, the glutes tend to get a little bit weaker, especially as we all get a little bit more mature. So all of us, whether we have dead butt syndrome or whatever, should be on a hip strengthening program. So I'll show you 2 ways in which you can search and then treat for trigger points in the hips. So what I like to recommend is a Rolga foam roller with ridges and a lacrosse ball. And I'll put links to both of these in the bottom of the description. And the reason is because we're going to work the glutes in a slightly different way with each one of these. First, we'll start with lacrosse ball. And really what we're after is the trigger points for the glute medius is in this top upper part of the hip right through here. So what you'll do is you'll put that ball right there, and then with the leg being bent, you're going to drop it down. And as you drop it down, that ball is going to sink into the glute muscle. And your job is to move that around in this whole area, basically the size of maybe a softball, and find out if there's anything that's tender. Now for me, if I move it around, right there is a pretty sore spot. Now the idea is once I find a sore spot, I'm going to work it for about a minute. Now when I say work it, it basically means I can keep steady pressure on there and hold it there and breathe through it for a minute. But if it's just too tender, then I'm going to pressure off, pressure on, let it kind of build, pressure off. But if you can handle it, what I want you to do is really keep the pressure on there, and then after a minute, move over to another one and spend no more than about 3 to 4 minutes per hip, because you can get too much of a good thing. Now the Rolga. This one's going to be a little bit different. You're going to come up to here. Once again, I'm going to work my left side. So first I'm going to start with my left leg straight actually, and go up and down and kind of put the ridge right into that glute area and see if there's anything that's tender. And if there is, same rules apply, about 1 minute worth of work. Then I can change the angle a little bit as well too by bending my knee and putting my left leg on top of my right knee and then making almost circular motions until I can find something, wow, like right there, that's pretty tender. And then once again, I'm going to hold it for a minute. I don't recommend using the lacrosse ball and the foam roller in one session, because I've had clients that do too much foam rolling and they end up with bruised tissue and they can get kind of sore. So pick one or the other. Yes, you can use a tennis ball, but eventually you're going to want a lacrosse ball because it's smaller and it can get into those deep hip rotators a little bit better. After you've done the trigger point work, then what we want to do is basically activation type of exercises specifically for the glutes. If you already lift weights, oftentimes you'll realize that you have your warm-up sets before you do the working sets, or your second set sometimes of an exercise is easier than your first set. And really what's happening is that your nervous system is getting primed to do the activity. And so when we talk about activation exercises, that's what we're talking about. When we say your glute has amnesia, things like that. Once again, I don't really like that phrase, but you'll hear that thrown out a lot. Basically what that means is that we have to do some activation type of exercises first. So one version is to be on a side plank, and you can come up onto your knees this way. Straighten out your top leg, and then you can lift up this top leg. So what's happening here is I'm getting a nice solid contraction of my left glute as well as my right glute, but my left glute's doing a lot more of the work. That's too hard. You can start off by just being in a side plank, and you can even lift up this top leg and do a clamshell this way. You can be on your side and lift up your top leg. In this situation here, I'm activating my right glute. Oh my gosh, Romeo's got gas. Another exercise that you can do is a bridge. So you can start off with the double leg bridge. You can come up and back down again. And remember, when you're up at the top, I want you to pause, and I really want you to squeeze your glutes tight. Because remember, there's a lot of the other accessory muscles that are doing the job as well too, but we really want to wake these guys up. And then back down again. Once that starts to get easy, you can go to a single leg bridge. Hold this leg out straight, come up, pause, and back down. Pause, hold that contracted position for a second, and back down. Another option is to do a bridge, and then keeping your pelvis nice and level, You can start to do some leg lifts and do a little bit of glute marching. Those are just different examples that you can use to kind of activate and then eventually strengthen up your glutes. Now, if you've been to the channel before, you know that I'm a huge proponent of walking daily and tracking your steps. So I had a client that works as a nurse, and in between patients, she would sometimes sit down in her chair and just aimlessly scroll through TikTok or Instagram. And so what I convinced her to do is to challenge herself to get at least 5,000 steps while she was at work. So what that meant was when she did have downtime or time in between clients or cancellation, rather than sitting down, she went for a walk in the hospital. And so really challenge yourself to try to get as many steps as you can, because that's another way of preventing your glutes from getting weak, keeping them strong and activated so that when you do call on them, they will be there for you. And you'll avoid the dead butt syndrome. If you have any questions, please leave it down below in the comments. If you've ever been told that you have dead butt syndrome or glute amnesia, let me know. Let me know what your thoughts are about it. These are just my thoughts. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't, if you found the video helpful, and I'll see you at the next video. Thanks for watching.